meeting. The board, it was chaotic. It was the first sort of meetings with Zoom. And rather than the peak roof section in the center, we were encouraged to go with the flat roof project. Having said that, the 40-foot, which we were at the maximum, we were reduced. But since we don't measure by grade with a waterfront project, we measure from the base flood elevation. However, my discussion with Mr. Woodsma over the phone and not in person, some confusion happened. And I thought that the measurement is coming from the floor, which is elevation 12, which is what the FEMA wants the floor to be. You have to be minimum of 2 foot above. So we lowered the house, the board approves, and on my drawing, I have measurement not from the 10 foot, which is the AE10 for the zone. I measured from 2 foot higher. And my drawings clearly show, and as I said, I've never given Mr. Wisdom cause to really check that I've done something incorrect. Likewise, you know, we have a good working relationship in that regard, and the project was approved. During the course of construction, the middle section of this, which is the barn, it turned out that it was not something which is hurricane compliant. The builder came across conditions where the wall was not balloon framed, which means it goes from the ground all the way up to the roof. It was actually hinged. It was 2 walls stacked on top of each other. The contractor, in good conscience, started to take apart more than he should have if it were classified as a quote unquote renovation or substantial renovation. We contacted the building department and came back for another approval. Actually contacted the town and they recommended a stop on the project to reclassify this as brand new construction. So this comes permit set number 2, a repeat of the same. I've got information on the drawings, which if you look at page 4 of this, actually page, I believe it would be 3 is a cross section. And again, it's human error, but I showed the 25 feet coming from the floor. And this is something which I thought was correct, and also which unfortunately it was an oversight that both the inspector and myself had not caught immediately. What's interesting during the course of the project, I typically visit my jobs as they're being constructed, and if I see something that's incorrect, I'll contact the building department and say, something is wrong. I've actually shut my own projects down, which owner may not like, but I enforce a code as much as an inspector would. I never came across any cause to alert to my visual attention that something was askew here. And it just turned out that we would not have known about this, except that the owner had a custom skylight, which was ordered during the course of the pandemic and installed on the roof maybe 2 months ago. And it was higher than the roof. I contacted Mr. Woodsburg right away and I said, I think we have something that's not code compliant. This thing, which is called a skybox, is a very expensive skylight where you can pull the door open and gain access to the roof. There are 2 lower roofs on this house, which are only 22 feet tall. In the course of doing that, we got a survey to measure the skybox. But we also got a survey to measure the roof. And that's where we both came to the conclusion or same realization that the house is 27 feet tall when it was supposed to be 25 feet tall. It is 25 feet tall from the floor, but it needs to be 25 foot tall from the imaginary line. Just to add to this, in terms of the visual impact, it never occurred to me that this was taller. The roadside grade is actually elevation 12. And as the property slopes down, it slopes down 2 feet over the course of maybe 70 feet. It's back some from the street. So it's difficult to tell. Project is working within the spirit of the code, which is to avoid a big billboard of the building. And having said that, there's no resident behind us who's being visually impaired, to a view shed of some sort. So, but the odd thing about this is we've reduced a height which could have been approved. It was an honest mistake, and the fact of the matter is, we wouldn't be here in front of you had we had a taller roof. So it's somewhat ironic, but it's a precedent which can't be set as a precedent because these were unique times. It wasn't an opportunity for me to meet with Mr. Woodruff and in person and say, here's my drawings. I even look back at the Zoom meetings and they were chaotic and confusing. I actually complained because the discourse between a board and the applicant, I didn't have that opportunity to look at you in the eye and explain. There are people jumping in. The mayor's wife was on the board at that time. There were a lot of interruptions and it was pure chaos. And when they said to lower the roof, make the whole house flat, we were making it lower. It is lower than the maximum. It was just an oversight. And I'm sorry for this long-winded explanation. I never had to go for a variance for anything in front of any board. And with the exception of one, I did the Domikowski farm, which we had this farm structures that we got to keep the character. I apologize that I didn't see this coming, and had we not installed this debris on top of the roof, we wouldn't have known this infraction occurred. And I think that speaks to the, I won't say minimal infraction, there should be no infraction, but the fact is that I don't think anyone could ever repeat this situation. So thank you for carrying on with this. Thank you, appreciate it.
If I may, before we go forward, I do have the affidavit of mailing and posting. And we also, which is in your package, have a letter of support from the neighbor.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's neighbor to left, right? Do you know? I'm not sure. Is it the address? I think the neighbor's on both sides.
She doesn't identify in her letter, and I don't,
Okay, well, I remember that now. Yeah, she just said that.
and she has no objections.
We can figure it
Nancy
out.
Alderman.
And Miss Alderman's across the street.
Oh, okay, so she's on the north side. of
Right,
the
she would be
Scion Pond.
facing-
Should we have a view of it,
Facing
right?
it.
I mean, there's an enormous amount of bamboo.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we
She's
have.
not gonna have a view, right?
Yep, okay.
So I think it's pretty clear after Mr. Florio spoke that we got here in good faith. Right? We thought we got a permit and we went through the process and we did what we believed was right. So now your job is to look at the balancing test. With respect to the character of the neighborhood, these are an area with large single-family dwellings. There was a house on this property since 1974. In your packet is the CO from the town. So the house has existed on this property an awfully long time. And other than the issue that we're having with the roof, the house complies with zoning. So I believe it's within the character of the neighborhood. Again, it went through the ARB and went through all the processes to get an approval. So the benefit in this particular case, which is to retain what has been built in good faith, can only be satisfied with this board granting a variance. Our two other options, if you choose not to grant the variance, is to put a hipped roof on it, which then gives us some more space. We have to go up to 40, but I think that would increase the size of the structure and create, I don't think it's an imposing structure at all, but it would be more imposing than it currently is, and we would bring it up to 40 feet. The second way to come into conformance is to lower the roof height, right? To take it down the 2 feet. And that's going to be an expensive endeavor. I have an estimate from the builder who's currently on site finishing construction, McGinnis Contracting. And I'll hand that up. I've also included a picture from the roof facing our western neighbor, which shows that that house is at a height that's significantly higher than the house that we're discussing today. The question?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from John at some point here too. Your input on this too.
If I could just
Sure.
finish my presentation
That's
and
fine.
address the test. Okay, so the next factor we look at is whether the variance is substantial. And the courts have told us, and the state of New York has told us that when we do that, we have to look at the totality of the circumstances. So I think what the two factors that I think play into the totality of the circumstances is first, the good faith effort by everyone involved to get here. We understand that there was a mistake, but everything was done again in good faith. The other factor that I think you need to consider is that the remedy here is that we would build a bigger roof. The ARB has frowned on that during that process, but there was a flat roof on either side and a hip roof in the middle. I mean, if we were to get denied, I think the first stop is to go to the board and say, hey, we need to put in hip roofs here. I don't think that satisfies, anyone, and I think creates a worse outcome than we have today. So I think that the totality of the circumstances would lead us to believe that variance is warranted in this particular circumstance. The fourth factor is the impact on the environment, which the roof has no impact on the environment. It's also a type 2 variance under SECRA, and the New York State DEC has been clear that type 2 variances won't have a negative impact on the environment. And this property has been scrutinized by the town conservation department, and we have gone through a lot of effort with them to comply with that. So from an environmental standpoint, I think what you have today is better than what existed prior to my client purchasing the property. Final factor is whether it's a self-created hardship. To the extent that it is, and I think we have to acknowledge that it is, because there was a mistake in the construction process. The courts have found that a self-created hardship is not fatal to an area application. So with respect to the balancing test, I would say that at least 4 of the 5 factors would tend toward the granting of the application, and we would ask that you do that. Thank you. We can try and answer any questions that you may have.
Does anybody have any questions?
I'd like to hear from John.
John, do you mind?
Not at all. John was with building inspector village town. So the original plan, as Mr. Florio was saying, is that the center section of the existing home was to remain. Now, that was a peaked roof. So under those rules, you have a height limitation of 32 feet from the base flood elevation. The base flood elevation is 10 feet. So when you add 32 to 10, you get to 42. However, we don't allow that. We have an artificial cap at 40. So it was a very easy height review for the first original structure. Hit the maximum cap, shows the maximum cap being hit, no problem. Once the house was under construction and they basically took out the center section without permission, now all of a sudden we're starting from scratch with a new house. And like Mr. Florio said, this was during COVID. So when I got the plans in, I already knew the house was at its maximum cap, and I didn't look carefully enough at where the measurement for 25 feet was being taken from. It should have been taken from the base flood elevation. It was taken from the base flood plus the freeboard, which is +2. So the house should have been 35 feet above base flood elevation. It ended up at 37.3. The 0.3 we would forgive no matter what. So it was an error on my part, and it was an error on Mr. Florio's part that came down to what it is. And it's only the center section actually, which is above the 25-foot height limit. Any questions, anything else?
Yeah, what was on the top that was taken off?
There's it's called a skybox made by a company called.
Is that what you're talking about, the skybox that you got during the?
In the definition of the Town of Southampton code, it's called a bulkhead, which is essentially allows one to climb a set of stairs to a landing and then open a door to walk out. And the skybox ingredient is a little glass box, which is supposed to be 3 foot tall and not be any taller than the maximum flat roof height. And I identified a variation with the skybox because the manufacturer presented a taller than typical skybox instead of only 3 foot tall, which matched the roof height. He sold the builder one, which was 6 foot tall. And so it immediately jumped out as something non-conforming. And that's when I contacted, and Mr. Woodsman had visibly seen it. I hadn't seen it. And then once I saw it, we both agreed something is askew here. And we made the decision to pursue a variance for that. However, it became apparent that the roof, that's when we had the roof survey to discover that the roof, which we always thought was code compliant, was 2 feet taller than it should have been. So I'm sorry for that, but the skybox is a bulkhead.
So what's gonna go in there now?
We removed it.
Okay.
It's been taken off.
They removed it, and we're getting new plans in to actually show how they're going to lower it into the existing structure, so it will then match the plan. When I was driving down the road, I saw the skybox and I said, wait a minute, I think that's supposed to be an even plane with the top of the roof. So I came back to when I got back to the office the next day, I looked it up, and sure enough, it was supposed to be, and that's when everything started to come out of the wash.
Can you just walk me through again? They were, during construction, we take something apart, we go from a renovation to a new construction. That's what puts us in front of the architectural review board. That's what ultimately puts us to the flat roof. I'm just trying to say, how did we get from that original structure peak to the flat roof?
Pat, can you bring up photograph number 9? Because I think you can see, this is the original application. It's not.
Yes, I don't, if I can help answer.
Okay.
When these are drawings which had shown the center section.
Mhm,
with
right,
the
okay.
peak roof.
Yep.
And this is what the architectural review board had wanted a more cohesive house because we were calling the barn portion, which was peaked, existing to remain.
Yes.
And yes, and they felt the architectural board members felt that it would be more cohesive since the house appeared modern to eliminate the peaked roof in the
Okay.
center, and that's why we reduced it.
Yeah.
However, we didn't reduce enough because the measurement was taken from the
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah, but it's a peak roof that I think probably initially caused the confusion. Plus, the village code is unusual. Most codes give you credit for the freeboard. Your code is different where it's just from the FEMA line for the base flood elevation. So I think that's how we got here.
Yeah.
And John, last one for me at least, if we do go the route of, a peaked roof, you're going before the architectural review board, it's just remind sort of the 25 is now 27.3.
So
You would
and
have-
a pitched roof,
Yeah.
anything over a 4 pitch, is allowed to go 32 feet from grade or 32 feet from base flood elevation. A flat roof house is allowed 25 feet from grade or 25 feet from base flood elevation. Now, if you're dealing with a FEMA zone and base flood elevation, the village has an artificially imposed height limitation of 40 feet.
Gotcha, okay.
So the peaked roof hit the 40-foot mark. You
Right.
don't have to look any further than that.
Yep. Yeah.
Once it got changed to a flat roof house is where I missed the height measurement.
Right, no, absolutely. Well, I'm just trying to go and when you think about what our options are, we really are, as Mr. Gilmartin was saying, we're looking at, and again, I'm not entertaining that that's the right
Yeah, you can add a
option,
peak
but
roof
it
and
would,
make it taller,
it would make
like
it taller
Yep.
than what variance we're looking
It'd be
at.
40 feet plus the chimney, so it would be significantly higher.
The chimney has to raise as well, you're correct? It has to be 2 foot above anything within 10 feet?
Does anybody else have any questions?
No, I mean, for me, it checks the box for everything. First of all, it's a beautiful home. I saw it today and walked around. It's really spectacular. Changing it to a peak roof, that doesn't do anything from an aesthetic point of view. Plus, it's a height increase. Obviously, an architect that's worked with the village before, with a great reputation, the fact that, John, you were all of this, you brought it to the attention because of the sky, I guess they call it the balcony sky thing, which is
Skybox.
skybox. I'd love to see what that looks like though.
There's one in Crestview.
Yeah. And the neighbor signing off, I mean, it checks all the boxes for me, so I'm fine with it.
It sounds like an honest mistake to me, and I think that everyone here is trying to put their best foot forward and trying to handle this in the best situation possible. Checks my boxes as well. How do you feel?
Matt, we haven't heard from other neighbors or anything. We heard from across the street, right? But the east and west, we haven't heard, but we noticed the meeting, so.
Everybody noticed, everybody was noticed.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and actually, John made a very good point before. The two neighbor houses are actually higher.
Right. Yeah, no, I stopped by there on my way here today. Yeah, Dawn, I agree with you. I mean, I think this is an honest mistake. I was just at the house on my way here. I would say the visual impact is,
Minimal.
I would go as far as perhaps to say de minimis, but yeah, minimal at the very least. It's really not any impact at all. And yeah.
John?
Well, it would be a precedent if I didn't say no. But I went by and looked at it, when I first was made aware that this was going to be an ARB thing, and I was confused because the next houses are bigger than this one, so I didn't quite see what the problem was, but that was explained to me, and I have no problem with this.
With Mary here, are we allowed to vote on this? We can? Okay.
And first you're gonna close the
Yeah.
hearing and
Yeah.
then you can vote
So,
on this application, close the hearing on this application. And then
so we'd like to close the hearing on this application. And
you gotta
Need
do
to
a
vote
vote.
that, so I'll
Okay.
make a motion on that.
make a motion to
Close the record.
close.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Uh,
Aye.
discuss.
Chris, is this the right procedure?
We have done that before where we've, if you want, you can vote on the application and then I can draft a decision that can then be adopted later. We can go that route if we want the to give applicant the opportunity to move forward to the building process.
Okay.
But we definitely want to write something on this just because we've had other, applications recently with the height variances. We want to make sure we have the lines drawn pretty clearly on it.
We would just ask that you move forward. It would be very helpful for us because we've been held up getting to see that.
Okay.
That'd be great.
So Chris, you'll be drawing those documents?
Yes, no, I can do that. So we can, and I think we did this a few months ago where we can just, we'll do the vote today and I can issue the decision that we'll have filed. You guys can adopt it at the next meeting and then we'll file it.
It was actually at the March meeting, we did that, yeah, I can do that. And I don't think there's really anything we have to think about, sort of adjacencies or anything else that we'd be looking for in that order. Chris, anything we should think about that wouldn't make this a straight up down decision?
No, I mean, I think looking at the precedent, you've had four applications recently that we rendered decisions on. And so I was looking at it today. So we denied two of them that were at 51 feet, max height. And those were bigger. That's 110 Sand Dune and 1145 Sag Main. But we did grant, much smaller variances at 1 Potato and the Petrillo just for the height. And that was 2 feet and 4 feet respectively. So, we've drawn a line where looking at, and the self-created issue is a big one here, where obviously the applicant and the building inspector kind of made a mutual mistake. And so that particular factor under the statute weighs pretty strongly for the applicant here. So I think you can do, an up and down vote here and we can have the applicant try to move forward.
Yes. For motion.
Okay. Oh, so I'd like to, can we have a motion to dismiss this? Approve the variance.
Yeah.
To grant the variance allowing for an additional 2.3 feet.
I'll make a motion for that.
Second. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Sorry, I get a little shy.
We also
You want to do a
Stage
motion?
right. I'd like to make a motion to,
Also minutes.
We want to do the March
Oh,
minutes.
I
we
read
can do
the minutes,
minutes.
they're fine, so.
Yeah.
If you want to make a motion.
would you like to make a motion to approve the minutes for March 10th, 2023 ZBA meeting?
Yes. I'll make
I'll
that.
second.
Okay, all in favor?
Now
All right, now. I thought it was so small. I'm sorry, I get stage fright, so it's like they picked the wrong person to do this.
Okay, we need a
Motion adjourned.
chair has to call for a
I'd like
motion.
to make, would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting? What?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Excellent.
Sorry,
No, that
I'm
was
sorry.
great. No.
Great job.
Excellent job.
I was not prepared for that, including my stage fright.